His name is Heston Blumenthal.
Hello.
Welcome on board to another journey to the centre of food. I'm Jay, your host for this adventure, along with James, our fat duck producer, and on today's show, some like it hot, as we are going to be delving inside our most used but often least considered of kitchen devices, the humble oven, to explore the science and get some tips about this vital piece of kit. So without further ado, let's meet a man whose hobs are always hot, Heston Blumenthal. Hello, sir.
Nice one. Are we talking about hobs or ovens?
Oh, good point. Is it not the same thing? That's how we're going to begin with this.
Okay, technically, depending on the question or the perspective, they can be exactly the same thing. If it is the device for physically changing ingredients that one puts in pots or pans, for example, they're the same. If the perspective is where the heat comes from, they are different. If the perspective is whether they are contained in a hot cupboard full of air, it's another perspective.
I could tell from James's face that basically he just went, no, they're not. They're not the same thing.
No. I should have just said no.
An oven is an oven.
You idiot, Jay. I should have just said no. Sometimes closed questions are very good. No,
they're not. So we're going to be doing ovens. We're not going to be doing hobs. A couple of weeks ago, we did a podcast all about knives, which I encourage you to go back to listen to, which is really interesting. And also we did one about how to design or build a kitchen, both professionally and also at home, or at least how Heston's gone about doing it. And within that, ovens came up, and we had some requests to do something specifically on ovens because it's such a massive area. But before we get to that, we've had some people getting in touch because we did ask about people's kitchen experiences. But Bray's Cottage got in touch, and she basically said she listened to the kitchen design one. It was very thought-provoking.
Bray's
thinking about
Cottage.
Bray's Cottage, yeah.
Yeah, they're the cottages that you can rent in Bray. But you said Bray's Cottage got in touch. So house.
She must be called Bray.
Yeah, I think this is an Instagram name, isn't it?
Yeah, she cooks. She pies, I think
she does.
If she's called Bray's Cottage, that's also very interesting.
It's curious, isn't it? Because like I said, Bray's
Cottage. There are Bray's cottages, and there's about 5 or 6 of them in Bray and they're beautiful. You can rent them.
This is someone else called, I believe, Bray, who has a cottage where she cooks. She basically has a very small floor space, 5 foot by 4 foot. She has very few gadgets, much like you said, and they have to earn their keep. But one thing she said, which I thought was very interesting, is she has got a second fridge and freezers in her studio. And to get to that, she has to go down the garden path. And she really likes doing that because she notices flowers, she picks herbs. So actually we were talking about making your space as efficient as possible. But what she's actually done is she's made her walk to get ingredients something that enhances her experience.
With my, let's call it ADHD. I've been diagnosed with extreme ADHD. After breathing, drinking, then eating is the next thing we need to do to survive the longest, and sleeping. So walking through a garden to get something, you can have a perspective of smelling the roses and seeing the lavender. You could have a perspective of going on a walk to try and remove a busyness in your head that you might not want to. Mm-hmm. You can go on a walk and think, I need to mow the lawn. You can go on a walk and think, oh, flipping no, it's raining. This is all perspectives, quantum perspectives. They're all there.
Yeah.
Me, if I go on a walk through the garden, it depends what the purpose is for. If I'm not careful, but is this a good thing or a bad thing? If I walk through my garden, I smell, I see, I hear like everyone does. But my head can get really, really busy. I think a lot. So my universe of food covers chemistry to biology to physics to history to philosophy to geology to geography to mineralogy to music to dance to blah blah
So
blah
a
blah
walk
blah
through
blah.
the garden for you is probably not a good idea when you're going to get your ingredients.
No, the least steps I make from where I am in my house to leave the door are often more beneficial, because I will look at an object and it will become a new universe.
Let's talk about ovens.
So I'm going to narrow it down. Otherwise, this will go into 75 million podcasts. Let's imagine that an oven
What's
is
an
a
oven?
square box
Yes.
that is somewhere in the wall,
Yes.
or movable, but we'll come back to the movable oven because it's very important, which uses elements to heat the air up in this said hot cupboard.
Are we happy, James? Are we happy with the definition of oven?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's in my mind, it's a hot contained space to which you can put something in, whether it be edible or...
Yes, but a hot contained space is also a pan of boiling water, or a microwave.
Well, this is a question I was thinking as you were talking about, sort of a sous vide, and the sous vide technique. If that's called an oven, it's an oven, right? So you could cook in air, or you cook it with water.
No, we're not doing that. We're not doing microwaves either.
Well, that's an oven, right?
And,
That's an oven.
and James, sous vide isn't an oven. Sous vide was original under air, which was used as preservation of food. Let's put that for another podcast. So
Okay.
I actually, right now, for my own head, don't care what the dictionary definition of an oven is. I'm
We're
telling
going with
you,
box full of hot air.
yes,
Like
box
this.
hot
Like
air.
the podcast.
The reason I'm saying this is people don't realise that air conductivity, the material that you're using and the way that you pass heat to transfer to food, there are a myriad of options, from sous vide to barbecues, from tandoors to microwaves. A microwave agitates the water molecules, vibrates them, and that's what heats the food up. In an oven, the elements heat the air up, and the air cooks the food. And why is this interesting? Many reasons, but right now, it's air. If you cook at a specific temperature, let's say you put the oven on at 100.
Yeah.
Many people still can't believe that you can cook anything at 100. So you open the oven door. I think that's not hot enough to cook anything. Put your fingers on the metal tray. You'll burn yourself.
Good point. Everything always seems to be cooked at 180 or 200. It seems to be everything is cooked. I don't know if that's just suddenly an industry standard or if that's always been so.
Now that's
I've never ever questioned
great question. It does, but yes, it does. It's almost like those on the bottles of bottles of wine, good with chicken, weddings, turkey, chocolate. So when I started reducing the oven temperatures, but you also used thermometers to test that the dial of the oven was actually the same as the temperature inside, and quite often they're not calibrated. So
really, I mean, that's another thing you don't question. You presume what it says on the front, and also which part of the oven's which, and in terms of heat, it can't all be the same temperature in there, right?
No, a convection oven which has a fan that is meant to distribute the air, again, air, will also have a different effect. So having an oven thermometer, which is inexpensive, even if you don't use it every time, will make a massive difference. So when people say I can't cook, they want to be interested in cooking. But that phrase, a bad workman always blames their tools. People who think they're not creative are. And questioning, for me, in the kitchen, led me to incredible discoveries. So low temperature cooking in an oven, putting an oven on at 50 degrees or 60 degrees, you open the door and you think, oh, this is absolutely, what am I going to cook in here? It won't even heat the water up.
Yeah.
But a 60-degree steak is medium.
And also it changes timings as well, right? If you do it lower, you can still cook it. It'll just take longer.
Completely. So it's also the conductivity of the cooking medium. boiling water, you wouldn't put your fingers normally in boiling water. 180 degree deep fat fryer, I would suggest to anyone listening not to put your fingers in it, that you will have a horrible burn. 180 degree oven, open the door, your glasses might steam up for a few seconds, put your hand in the air, doesn't feel that hot.
Yeah. It's only when you touch the metal, isn't it, that you actually...
Yeah.
And also, when you open that door as well, I know we're always told, that's one of the things, you don't open the door very often, but when that air comes out, I'm curious, because, again, the oven thermostats generally don't tell you how quickly they reheat to that temperature. Once all that air goes, you're basically starting again from scratch, aren't you? Reheating the air again once it escapes.
Kind of. I mean, depending on how wide you open the door and how long you leave the door open, and you might have a casserole in the oven with water in the casserole. So if the casserole has been in the oven for 2 hours and you open the door, the temperature will drop. If you try and turn an oven down with the door closed, it takes a lot longer than you think for the temperature to drop.
That's a really good point that I've never considered. That idea that actually you may say, I want you not so hot, but the air's still got to go somewhere, right? And it won't naturally cool down that quickly.
Yeah.
So how did you, when you started figuring out that there were all these potentially quite difficult variables to deal with, how did you go about starting to try and control them, or at least understand them all? Did you put lots of thermostats in the oven? What was your way of doing it? And also, every oven's different, right?
Yeah, coming back to was it Bray?
Yeah,
the 5x4 kitchen. That for me is a great point. Less is more. Only when things start to become removed can you value more what is left. So at the Fat Duck, the kitchen was so tiny. It was difficult, but it also forced me, inspired me, I made it myself, however you want to say it, to look at things in more detail. If somebody had put £10 million into a kitchen as my first kitchen, and I could have anything I wanted, I had too much choice. These days, we have too much choice. Walking around a supermarket, for me, is...
yes, I can testify having been with you in those places.
Yeah, I see an ingredient or a box or a name on a box and then think, I might do that. And then
you come out with such a random array of things. Normally, you go in to buy a sandwich, you come out with a pair of plimsolls and 3 parasols or something.
Yeah.
So out of that, interestingly, you ended up building your ultimate multi-million-pound kitchen in the Fat Duck.
Yeah.
If you had been given that money when you started to make an oven,
I don't think I would. No way. I mean, it would have been different, but I don't think in any way I would have been able to use that adversity to ask questions and discover things for myself.
So you might have just bought the most expensive oven and used that, but never actually have questioned like this. Yeah. Just how it works within one, and because you had one which was naturally quite faulty by the sound of things, or at least not.
It was terrible. It was the old pub oven. Yeah. Oh, and Argos. Oh, we could do a podcast on Argos.
Now, what is up with these?
What is about an Argo? I did this again. Quantum perspective. I wrote a whole article on this years ago, I think, for the Guardian. Why did people go, oh yes, I love my Argo? Now, me, I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with loving an Argo, but it depends on the perspective. As a cooking tool, it was absolutely useless unless you rose to the challenge of the complexity of it.
But what is it? What makes them different? So they're just ovens that don't turn off.
4 ovens, which can make your kitchen really hot all the time. But you've got 4, let's say you've got an Argo with 4 oven doors and then 2 hobs. When you lift the hob up, the air comes out of the oven.
Wow. So it's like a multi-oven almost.
It's an oven that seems to go up and down and in and out and left and right like a yo-yo. So you could either be really, 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 this comes back to the book we're doing. You can approach it as from many different perspectives. If you were cooking in a professional kitchen with a team of chefs, Oh my God, would be a nightmare. Never would I touch it with it. No, but I learned to love it because it challenged me. So I lift this one up, and the top oven changes temperature quicker and more than the bottom oven on the left-hand side. And if I lift the right one up, that has a different effect.
So it has a personality almost, doesn't it? I mean, most things, but they sound like they have more personalities. James, I imagine you as an Arga man. I don't know if you do have, or if you don't have one, aspiring to be an Arga man.
I'm going to leave you to keep that thought. I'm about as far from an Arga man as can be. Currently,
I think an Arga man is an oxymoron, paradox.
I just think I've never had one, so I've never had that chance to fall in love with it in any way, and I think
I don't think I've heard many men say, I love my Arga.
I guess it's kind of one of those things. Maybe people, when they buy a house somewhere, it's got one in it, and they learn to love it that way. And then once you've understood its mystery, then maybe it's a different journey. And I think, listening to you two talk, I'm thinking of a piece of advice someone gave me years ago, which it makes sense. It's kind of when you're cooking, the first thing you need to do in any kitchen is know your oven. You've got to understand the tools with which you're going to try and engage with to cook whatever you want to cook, and the oven is a very important part of your kitchen setup, which is and every oven, even my very, very 1990s, I think, Bosch oven.
Are you laughing?
Because I don't know where it's come from, this oven, because it was in the house when I bought it.
Still modern.
And it's unpredictable. It's sometimes contradictory. The dials sometimes say one thing when they mean another. I can put the same thing in for the same time on the same dial setting, and it goes black in 15 minutes as opposed to not cooking at all in 40 minutes.
James, now we're going. Now we're on a roll.
Yeah, so
keep going.
But this is kind of this is what the oven is all about, and its journey in our and the human existence is very important, because we've sought to control that beast of a thing that's now in our own home. It started off being an open fire, which is completely unpredictable and can burn everything down. We then put it in the ground. We built things like tandoors and other kind of whatever civilization.
Holes in the ground.
So we try always. It's about
use clay.
It's about trying to gain control over something that refuses to be tamed. That's the truth of it. And
me.
Absolutely, and that's why you versus the oven is a fascinating journey for us gastronomic observers.
You know what? You just reminded me of something. When I was writing for The Guardian and was getting more obsessed on temperatures, I did a roast chicken recipe with roast potatoes. And this is before I realized how long you could leave a chicken resting after you cooked it. It would still keep hot. We rented a house in Bourne End that had an oven with a little oven above it that had a grill on it. So I suggested, let's put the chicken in the oven and you can roast your potatoes in the grill. And this was almost the last straw for me for The Guardian. Apparently, of all of the journalists in The Guardian, I apparently had the second most complaint letters. I wasn't writing about homosexuality, feminism, world wars, starvation, diseases, cancer, government, politics. I was just writing about cooking. And I remember one Saturday morning, before going to work, I went to have a coffee with my daughter, and I got The Guardian, the magazine, and I looked at the letters page. And there were two letters, and I had a lot more. One was that with cooking, I had suggested using a litre of olive oil to cook salmon. Someone said, not since the days of, what's his name? Who was the really extreme Roman emperor?
Caligula. I was going to say it would be like Nero or Caligula.
Not since the days of Caligula has such What? And then, because it also said, Heston is on holiday. These are my issues, by the way. Heston's on holiday for away for 3 weeks. I wasn't. They just every now and then gave me a break to have a guest writer on. I'm on. Why does people think I'm on holiday? And why was I bothered about it? So then one letter.
Other complaint.
So it said, Heston is away for 3 weeks. Let's hope he never comes back. Who does he think he is? Heston, 2 ovens, Blumenthal.
Oh, because you suggested that you had 2 ovens. That's amazing. He's lost touch with the common man.
Yeah.
2 ovens.
Yes, private jet, super yacht. That's renting a house in Bourne End, which had massive gas leaks, and the oven was. There's something that James's Bosch oven
would recognise.
So maybe there is something very interesting about human beings' evolutionary relationship with fire and being able to control fire or control us, which then leads us to barbecues, which is another subject. Men and their barbecues having the need to
control their fire.
Yeah.
Well, talking about the private jets then, which obviously you fly around in now.
Okay.
What? Fast forward to
airplane food.
The new fat duck. When you did get to design your ovens, which I think the other day you mentioned was very expensive, to put it mildly. What were they? I mean, what makes them so expensive, and how were they great ovens? What did you build into them that made them?
Well, the most expensive kitchen ever built was the one that was done at dinner in Australia, and there were 3 central aisles. They call them aisles or piano. In French, they're pianos. So imagine a big rectangular metal unit which has ovens underneath. It has hobs, things on top, and each one of those, I designed them. The casing, the wrought iron casing, was made by one company, very famous one. The titanium top was made by another one. Titanium is very good for holding a meat. I can talk about this for a long time. There were heating drawers in it made by another company. The induction hob was made by a Swiss company. They were hand sanded down, so there were no sharp corners. Many other things. Each one was £275,000. There were 3 of them, and ouch. I remember standing in the kitchen with Ashley and Johnny and thought, "Oh my God!" I mean, this wasn't my company, it wasn't my money. It was like a kid at Christmas time, but I could have only got this by spending thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of hours in a crappy little old pub kitchen to be able to design this kitchen. I thought, my God, each one of these pianos, central ovens, with all the bits on, cost more money than the fat duck did. And those 3 middle aisles were just part of the kitchen. It was one of those moments. Oh, flipping heck. But thanks to the adversity, the crappy kit, the crappy, tiny kitchen, and to me, and thousands, tens and tens and tens and tens of thousands of hours spent in it, trying to search for something, I discovered so many things, and then was able to build this kitchen in dinner, and then the kitchen at the Duck. That was a couple of £1 million. The extraction hood was 150 or 200,000 pounds.
When you had the terrible ovens in the Fat Duck to begin with, did you end up cooking some stuff out of the oven that you would traditionally cook in it just because they were so unreliable and didn't really do what you wanted them to do? Did you alter any of your... I know you altered quite a lot.
That's when I invented sous vide. I mean, I didn't invent sous vide. It was sous vide was a process of vacuum packing food developed. But
that's when you made the decision to start cooking things in water baths.
Yeah,
that was
one of the things.
Wow.
To get consistency, measure temperature. So for me, another Einstein quote: why do we need to learn things that we can look up? Many of us have become slaves to the things that we invented to apparently make our lives easier. How much time do you spend on technology?
Well, if I want to poke my wife to get angry, I do make a point to her occasionally, which she hates with our kids. I'm like, do they really need to learn to write, handwriting? Because I said, look at our adult lives. We only elect to occasionally handwrite 100%. Notes to ourselves because we are old school. There's no need in your modern adult life to ever write anything by hand.
So always,
unless you really want to.
James has disappeared, but
disgust at what I just said.
Yes, Maybe.
And I love writing, right? And I
This
write
is
it
a
all by
runaway.
hand, so I'm a complete contradiction.
One of my metaphors is, why do we need to know where a semicolon goes? And I remember
I put them
when
in every so often. It's like salad. I sprinkle it on the top every so often, like parsley. Put it on because you think it looks fancy.
when I was in Australia one time for the world's 50 best, I think it was Lifetime Achievement Award, and you could only criticize something when you've won it. Otherwise, people think that you're bitter, and have an amazing relationship with them as a platform. I feel more relieved that I can breathe now, because I'm now an icon. So I can't be number 47 or number 3. I can't be in it anymore. So they are an amazing platform. When at that Lifetime Achievement Award, I talked about this in human beings and what is better and what is best. And you could have the best, and better is the largest restaurant, the fastest restaurant, most expensive restaurant. That's better and best. You can have your own better and best in terms of internal emotion, but the mixing of the two gets confused. And because food is so complex and eating is so complex, what is best? I mean, one day you might want a pizza delivered in a cardboard box, and another day you might want a proper Naples pizza with, nicely fermented sourdough straight from the oven. One day you might want something on it, and next day you might want something else. So that's your best. So how can you have a best restaurant? It's like saying that Picasso was a better artist than Dali or Van Gogh or Reynolds or Turner.
We love our lists, though, don't we?
Oh, we love our lists. And so I went on Australian TV. Australia is a very list-orientated country. 60% of the newspapers are devoted to sport, numerical, winning. So I go on their biggest breakfast TV show to talk about the world's 50 best and what is better and best. And food is, our relationship with food can't be measured. It can be if you want it to be, in terms of instructional cooking. But what is more complex is our self-awareness, how we can use food to learn more about ourselves and our relationship with the planet. That took a bit of explaining. And the woman was looking at me a bit strange. Then the next guest on the sofa was a semicolon terrorist. I never heard of such a thing. What this man would do was go around anywhere, like billboards or where he thought a semicolon was put in the wrong place. He would graffiti it and cross it off.
Amazing.
It's incredible. A semicolon terrorist.
Amazing. A semicolon terrorist. There we are. So we are, unfortunately, running out of our oven cooking time. But before we go, is there anything else on the theme of ovens that you want to pass on to our listeners? Any other thoughts you have on it? Just how people at home can sort of look at their square box in the corner and go, okay, what do I do with this? I
would recommend an oven thermometer just to check that what you set the dial to is the same. Remember time temperature. Time temperature is really, really, really important. You can kill bacteria by superheat short time, slower heat long time. The more a piece of food, the food is in the oven at the higher temperature, the more you kind of think that air in the oven is also water. It's still got some kind of moisture. It's not completely dry. If you've got, for example, a piece of beef in there, the water in the beef heats up. So the longer the beef is in the oven for at a higher temperature, when you take the beef out of the oven or the chicken, you've then turned that chicken or beef into an oven of its own. So you have to consider that's very important. Minutes per pound of cooking is just nonsense. Because, again, let's take a rib of beef that is 1 kilo. So you cook for X amount of minutes per kilo or pound. But that kilo, it's a long rib of beef. So it's about 1 inch thick. If you go for 2 ribs of beef that are shorter, but still with 1 kilo, they could be 3 inches thick. So the temperature is not going to permeate in the same way. So I would suggest when cooking meat, just cook at a lower temperature for longer, and then brown. Then if you want to, then crank the oven up and brown it. You might want your meat cooked higher for longer. But remember, take an oven temperature. Just test that your oven dial is accurate. And if you don't have James's old Bosch oven, you have a relatively new oven, then you can get someone to come and adjust it.
Or you just calibrate it.
Calibrate it. Or you can just buy a 5, 6, 8 pound oven thermometer that you just stick on the shelf.
I didn't know you could recalibrate them. That makes a lot of sense. And again, it's one of those things, you just presume what it says on the front is exactly right, and I've never even questioned it. I think it's also, like you said, getting to know your equipment can only make you a better cook, because you are more aware of what you're cooking with, how you're cooking it, and it will help define the way you do cook.
If indeed you're interested in it at all. So when you have less equipment and it's old, for example, and battered and it goes all over the place, it is an opportunity to discover. If you've got 20 minutes to cook and you're not interested, then you want something that does what it says on the tin. They're two different perspectives. I'm not saying that one is better than the other. So, but I have loved getting to know my ovens. And the last,
probably the chefiest thing you've ever said as well. I love that.
The last thing I would say linked to an oven that was a really key thing for me. I used to make a lemon tart, the Fat Duck, and it was a custard-based lemon tart. And I wanted it to be cooked so that when cooked twice a day for lunch and dinner service, and when you cut it, it was just about to fall apart, melt, but not. If it melted, if it started to sag, it wasn't quite cooked enough. Any graininess was knackered for me, for this particular custard lemon tart. And a couple of times, more than a couple of times, the lemon tart was either grainy or not cooked enough. So, but when I taught the small team I had to cook the lemon tart, you put the pastry in, you pour the custard in, wobble it. I called it the wobble test. So there was a sort of circle of custard in the middle of the custard tart that if you shook the pan in a particular way would wobble in a particular way. And then when they said, well, this is overdone. Well, I've done the wobble test, chef. So what I did for a week to 10 days is I did it myself, and I probed that part of the custard, and I was within 1 degree every time. Not because I'm amazing, it's just because you do something long enough and you then become better. So the wobble became 71.5 degrees. So cook said tart until temperature reaches said temperature.
That's a lot easier than the wobble test.
If
you're not you.
Yes. Yeah, it is. Not necessarily better though.
Heston, thank you ever so much for taking us inside the oven with you. James, thank you for sharing your harrowing Bosch memories or experiences. We'll be getting the Arga out to you
yes, please.
shortly. But for now, Heston, thank you ever so much. We will speak to you again soon.
Thanks, chaps.